let's get started on my first book review. Gotta get back in the swing of this. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Big City B. I'm B for those of you who are just joining me for the first time. It's time to jump into 2021, and that means our first book review. The first book that I read of 2021 is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This book is a dark contemporary fiction, and if you haven't heard of this book before, maybe you're living under a rock, but all jokes aside, there are a lot of heavy trigger warnings in this book, so make sure you check out down below in the description to see what those are. Alrighty, here's your summary. 2000, bright, ambitious, and yearning for adulthood, 15-year-old Vanessa Y becomes entangled in an affair with Jacob Strain, her magnetic and guileful 42-year-old English teacher. 2017. Amid the rising wave of allegations against powerful men, a reckoning is coming due. Okay, on to our characters for this book. For track 1, we definitely have Vanessa Y and Jacob Strain. For track 2, we have Taylor Birch and Vanessa's mother. For track 3, we have Jenny, Vanessa's father, Ruby, and Henry Plow. Getting started on what I liked about this book. The first thing that I liked about this book was that it seemed like it was almost a retelling of Lolita in a more modern context, but also showing much more of the complexities around both the abuser and the abused. And there are a lot of callbacks and references to Lolita in this book, as well as other literary works that fantasize the teacher-student relationship. The second thing that I liked about this book was the dark and disturbing ways that we saw how likely it was to be groomed by someone. How one could feel loved and like the situation was okay just because of all the little disgusting bugs that he planted in Vanessa's mind. The third thing that I liked about this book was showing the long-term effects of abuse and how that affected Vanessa in every aspect of her life. And in 2017 Vanessa, you can definitely see how she is trying to cope with her abuse before going to a therapist with alcohol or weed, and just feeling very stuck in her life, and how that affected other relationships in her life and her career paths. I just thought that was very interesting, although very sad. Moving on to things that I didn't like about this book. The first and probably biggest thing that I didn't like about this book was the variations in chapter length between past Vanessa and present Vanessa. Present Vanessa was given such short chapters. They were maybe a third of the length as past Vanessa was. And I didn't have a problem with this for the first half of the book. But then an event that I feel like maybe should have gone at the end of the book happened, and yet we were still going into the past, and I felt like we should have been spending more time with present Vanessa at that point. And past Vanessa was getting too much page time. I felt a lot of it could have been shortened and condensed and had a more equal setup between past Vanessa and present Vanessa. So I basically summarized both of my points of what I didn't like about this book in that first point, so there's nothing left for me to do except go on over to Goodreads takes. Goodreads on a whole gave My Dark Vanessa a 4.06 for reviews. But what fun is just talking about how great Goodreads thinks of a book? Let's go into some of the more negative reviews and also some of the higher praises for this book. A general consensus among the people who didn't like this book agreed that it was too disturbing, too long, and they didn't like Vanessa. I already talked about how I thought this book could have been condensed in sections, so I do agree with that. For it being too disturbing, did you not read what the book was about? Did you not hear people talking about what this book was about? understand that there are not yet trigger warnings in books, and hopefully one day that will be just a standard norm for books to have trigger warnings on them. But I feel like if you obviously have boundaries of what's too disturbing for you to read, then maybe you need to do some research about the books before you read them. Because if that's going to be your main criticism, that's just you don't like that kind of content, or for you personally, that's too triggering for you. It doesn't mean that the book is bad. I saw a person that gave a 3 to this book who enjoyed the book fine. They thought it was okay, maybe didn't click as well for them, thought certain parts could be condensed, but they actually thought another book did the abuse theme better, and that was Putney by Sofka Zinoviev. That's definitely a very Russian Eastern European last name, and I definitely got it wrong. But I did read Putney as well, and I went back on my ratings to see what I gave that one, and I gave both of these books the same reading. There was something in both of them that didn't quite click for me, but I do agree that I think I liked Putney a little bit more than I liked My Dark Vanessa. For the people who ended up giving My Dark Vanessa a 5, they really enjoyed the complexities that were shown throughout the book of abuse and how someone is groomed, and also the complexities of the Me Too movement and how that influences both the abusers and the abused, and if it makes them have to come out and accuse their abusers. Also, people liked the pop culture references of over-sexualizing youth and young girls. I think this was very present around the 90s and early 2000s. We got Britney Spears being very over-sexualized at a young age and her schoolgirl outfit, but it's also carrying on now into present day 2020, 2021 with the sexualizing of Billie Eilish and in general the modeling industry, where the younger you are, the more beautiful you are, and really you're like a spent model at 25, which is ridiculous. So I think this is a problem that our society still deals with, and is one of the points of why this book is still timely. Going on to our last section before I disclose if I would recommend this book or not, let's go to our quotes. Quote number 1, people will risk everything for a little bit of something beautiful. Taking this and putting it in a more generalized, not so dark lens, this can be applied to people taking the risk of death in order to have a surgery for their boobs or butt implants, or having Botox or lip injections, anything so they can feel just a little bit more beautiful. Quote number 2, he wants to leave his fingerprints all over me, every piece of muscle and bone. This quote I felt just really encompassed what it's like to be abused. It's not just the one thing that's happened to you, it affects every single part of you. There's no part of you that's left untouched. Quote number 3, I'm starting to understand that the longer that you get away with something, the more reckless you become, until it's almost as if you want to get caught. This one I think can apply to so many things. It can be as innocent as a kid who is keeping candy in their bedroom. Like you do it so much and then you start eating the candy in front of your parents and you get caught. Or you're skipping school so much that you you don't even try to sneak out anymore. You just blatantly walk out and you get caught. I think that in a way it's almost like a cry for for help, or a cry for attention, to be seen, because obviously you know what you're doing is wrong and it might feel good for a little bit, but then you start to feel bad that you're not being paid enough attention to, that someone would catch you doing it. So lastly, that brings me to, would I recommend My Dark Vanessa? Yes, I would, if not simply to read about how easy it is for the public eye to either look away from people who are abused, or to turn the abused and not the abuser into the villain of the story. And I thought it was interesting to read about the complexities of being abused and how that affects every part of your life, and how easy it is to make yourself the worst person relationship between you and your abuser. So I would recommend this book, but I definitely want you to read a little bit more about what people are saying, read about the trigger warnings. It is a dark and disturbing book, and if you can't handle that, then no, this is not a book for you. If you do not like, it sounds weird to say if you don't like dark and disturbing, but if you don't like dark and disturbing, don't read this book. Alrighty everyone, that's all I have for you today. Let me know down in the comments if you've read My Dark Vanessa, if you did, what you thought about it, or if you're planning on reading it. All the best always. Bye.